Having lived in both China and now America, what is your opinion on how the public looks at the UFO topic? Is there a difference?
Yes, there's a large difference. They don't expect anything from the government. But in the US, I think there's a mentality that people are still waiting for the so-called official disclosure. How the secret society manipulates the politicians or business leaders of the world behind the scenes through different means, not just mind control, but also social engineering. They developed very strong psychic abilities to see the past, to see the auras of people, and to see the probabilities of the future. The Jewish people account for only about 0.2% of the world population, but 22% of the Nobel Prize winners are Jewish people. So are many of the financiers, the business people, and also scientists. And the book explains very logically why that's the case. The Chinese already know that they're ETs, and I think they're taking a lead in getting this information known by the people. We are all the creations of the Creator, and when the Creator created any one of us, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each of our astral bodies. So this is why we can pray, we can meditate to communicate to the Creator directly through our higher selves without going through the church or the pastors or the priests. So we should not worship any idols or foreign gods because the kingdom of God is within us. We should look inside for answers.
Okay, Samuel Chong, welcome. Thank you for coming on the channel. So from my understanding, you were born in Beijing, China, but you now live in California for over 30 years working as a lawyer. Is that correct?
I've been in California for 30 years already. I've been working as a lawyer just for a year or so.
And you've spent a lot of that time kind of dedicated to bringing the Thiaoouba prophecy to a global audience. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, Thiaoouba prophecy or Jehovah prophecy.
Right. Okay. But this prophecy, like this isn't your story. It was actually written by an Australian guy named Michel Desmarquet. I think he was Australian French in 1993.
Yes, a French-Australian, Michel Desmarquet. Yes.
Yes, yes. So for anyone who doesn't know, I think that would be a good place to start. If you could kind of go over his story briefly and what it's about, and also why it has compelled you to kind of bring this to a larger audience.
Yeah, the book tells about his personal encounter with the ETs from a highly advanced civilization called the Thiaoubans. And they actually took him to their planet for 9 days, and then he came back. That event occurred in 1987. Michel de Marquet, he was a French-Australian farmer or landscaper who lived in Cairns, Queensland, Australia. He did not have a lot of education, and the event took place before the age of the internet. And he wrote the book documenting what he saw, heard, and experienced on the planet Thiaoouba, as well as information about what they told about us about how certain events occurred on Earth in the past, including like where we all came from, the meaning of life, certain events as documented in the ancient scriptures, such as the Bible, as well as the warnings to us, like the real dangers on Earth facing us right now. Frankly speaking, the first time I read the book, I thought it was a science fiction until I read the chapter on who was Christ. Because it answered all the questions about the Bible. I did not believe anything in the Bible in the past. But after reading the book, I believe that certain events in the Bible really happened in history in the past.
So what was that in particular in the book that really changed your mind?
For example, when I came to the US, I went to the church. I participated in the Christian gatherings and the church services. But I was mostly there for social reasons, trying to improve my English and get my social networks expanded. I did not believe the miracles performed by Christ because I think I believe that it's just too good to be true. And also the magics performed by the magicians in like the pharaohs and the magicians of the pharaohs during Exodus or before Exodus, I didn't believe anything like that. But the book actually connects all the dots, answering a lot of questions that I was curious about. For example, why Jesus never performed miracles before he began preaching, and why there's a tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan, that the book talks about, and who really parted the sea for Moses, leading the Hebrews out of Egypt during Exodus, who really gave the mannas for the Hebrews to eat, and also why Christ resurrected after 3 days, and not 2 days, not 4 days. And there are a lot of questions that I had in my mind when I was reading the Bible, and also why, like, the Hebrews were the chosen people. Why not the Chinese, not the Americans, not the Europeans, not the Indians? Why the Hebrews? Why there was no mentioning of the Chinese people in the Bible? Like I was always questioning the teachings of the priests or the pastors in the church. But this book connects the dots, explaining why the Hebrews were the chosen people and why the Jewish people excel at everything that they do. Like if you learn the statistics, the Jewish people account for only about 0.2% of the world population, but 22% of the Nobel Prize winners are Jewish people. So are many of the financiers, the business people, and also scientists. And the book explains very logically why that's the case. And when you read the book, you're going to say, oh, this is why, this is why. It's very reasonable. And I think the book answers a lot of the mysteries that I had in my mind about the paranormal, like the Great Pyramid of Egypt, who built it, for what purposes, and why they built it, what it was used for, what happened in the Bermuda Triangle, as well as like questions about the human energy fields or auras that people can see, some people can see, and also ghosts, like some of the people claim to be able to communicate with. And also, it actually tells a lot of things about the political systems in the world. It actually says that the dictatorship government is not recommended, and also the two-party system in the world that some countries have right now has also some issues, and also it gives us suggestions to the people on Earth how to create a better system, a better political system, so that we don't have the swing effect. The Republicans, the Democrats in the U.S., or Labour's, Conservatives in the U.K., and also tells about the dangers on Earth. Number one, money. Number two, politicians. Number three, journalists and drugs. And number four, religions. So the book has a lot of interesting facts that I was able to investigate and research further.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said there at the start that this book specifically details why Jewish people seem to be sort of disproportionately winning Nobel Prizes compared to their actual population size. What does it actually say about them?
Well, I really would recommend people to read the book to learn more about the reason. In fact, according to this book, there are different kinds of ETs that visited us in the past and are still visiting us. And we, in fact, all came from different planets originally.
Do you mean each race of human being came from a different planet?
Yes, for example, the Caucasians came from a different planet. The yellows, the Chinese people, came from a different planet. The blacks also, and the ancestors of the in the Pacific Islands, they also came from a different planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hebrews also did. But there are different kinds of planets in the universe. There are different categories of planets. And we are currently living on category one planet, the lowest category, and learning the basics like elementary school students. The ETs who have been visiting us um, throughout history, some of them came from a higher level, higher category of planet. And the Thiaoubans came from category 9 planet. And they actually were responsible for the destruction of the two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. And they actually led the Hebrews out of Egypt, parting the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, but the Sea of Reeds. They actually were responsible for the birth of Jesus. And they actually had Christ to preach us about spirituality and love. And also is actually one of them who died on the cross and resurrected 3 days after. The Hebrews came from a different category of planet originally. And we are currently living on category 1 planet, but the Hebrews came from a category 3 planet called Hebra originally. And this is one of the reasons why they were chosen, because, during Exodus or before Exodus, they were actually enslaved by the pharaohs. The pharaohs of Egypt deprived their practices of being spiritual, like learning or practicing spiritual development. And the Thiaoubans believed that it's time to help them out. So they had Moses born, and then being the leader to help the Hebrews escape from the evil rules of the pharaohs. So did Jesus during the Roman regime. So they were actually causing a lot of confusions to the Hebrews, because as you know, the Romans had a lot of gods or goddesses to believe in, and actually the book suggests that we should be spiritual and communicate to God directly without going through the different intermediary agencies or the idols. So this is why in the Old Testament of the Bible, there's a theme that the Hebrews are not to worship any idols, because according to the Thiaoubans, we are all the creations of the Creator. And when the Creator created any one of us, or every one of us, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each of our astral bodies. So this is why we can pray, we can meditate to communicate to the Creator directly through our higher selves. So we should not worship any idols or foreign gods, because the kingdom of God is within us. We should look inside for answers.
That's something that really, really resonates with me. And it's interesting you said that, like, for example, the Hebrews, they came from a planet named Hebra, which was a third level planet.
Yeah, category
So
3
is that
planet. Yes.
a category 3 planet? So like if we're speaking about a hierarchy, obviously a category 3 planet is more advanced or older than a category 1 planet that Earth is. Is that what you mean by that?
More advanced spiritually or technologically. The Hebrews actually came here by accident. So they had a malfunctioning of their spacecraft. So they landed here in what's now today's southern Russia by accident. And then they encountered their neighbors, like the people who lived on Earth, who behaved like savages trying to rape their women. But the Hebrews originally had advanced weapons. So they killed some of the people trying to rape their women. And then because of the temperature, it was very cold at that time. So they moved south to what's now today's Middle East, Israel. And they migrated there, and they started their civilization, which had a lot of troubles assimilating with the lives on Earth. And this is actually a conflict that occurred in the past as well with their neighbors. The Hebrews with their neighbors had a lot of issues in the past. But I hope that things are going to get much better nowadays.
In China, in Japan, South Korea, this book is very well known and quite popular. So it's interesting to hear that, because obviously the narrative that it delivers around the Hebrew people is quite different to what is accepted and spoken about in the West. Do you think maybe that has something to do with it, or why is it more popular in the East?
Well, the book was self-published in Australia in the very beginning because the author who passed away in 2018 had a difficult time finding a publisher who would be publishing the book as a nonfiction. All the publishers he reached out to wanted to have the book published as a science fiction, but he didn't want to. So finding no publisher willing to publish it, he had to resort in self-publishing it. And in China, it's a different story because China has a very strict censorship on any publications related to UFOs or ETs or spirituality. And the book was actually published as a science fiction in China with the permission of the author. And especially during COVID or pandemic, people were longing for books written about spirituality. And this is a book of spirituality. And people really wanted to know about the meaning of life, how to live a more fulfilling life. And this book got into their needs, fulfill their needs to reading something that can really help them out spiritually. So this book began to become very popular, especially during the pandemic period. And the reason why it hasn't been really popular in the West was mostly because that the book has a lot of information that's far ahead of its time. For example, it talks about um, homosexuality. It talks about the Hebrews, the origins of the Hebrews. It talks about the dangers of, for example, hallucinogenic drugs. I know in the West, a lot of people want to try to be more spiritual by taking some kind of hallucinogenic herbs to experience this kind of spiritual awareness, so-called spiritual awareness or spiritual experience. But this book talks about the dangers of taking anything hallucinogenic, because when you try to move your astral body to a location where it's not supposed to be, you're actually in essence damaging the electrons of the astral body and getting a little bit deeper than what I'm not supposed to be. But I did verify that. I asked a lot of aura readers to see if they can tell the differences between the auras of people who use hallucinogenic drugs versus people who don't. And they all tell me that the people who take drugs have very ugly auras, like kind of distorted auras than people who don't use hallucinogenic drugs.
Does it say anything about, like, is it inherently bad? Because there are people who say, for example, take mushrooms once or twice and seem to come out of it with a far more broader perspective of the world themselves, and often have like sort of a positive revelation from the experience. So does this book talk about them being inherently bad, or just that they have the potential to do damage?
Well, you can actually experience anything that you can experience taking mushrooms through meditation. And the book says that if you take it once or twice, you're going to damage a little bit. If you take it for a long time, you're going to cause a lot of issues when you reincarnate in the next lifetime. So we take away spiritual lessons when we pass in the form of memories in the electrons of the astral bodies. If you use the mushrooms or the hallucinogenic drugs, you're going to cause a lot of like noise or interferences in the memories of the spiritual electrons. It's your decision, because when the Creator created us, it actually gives us a free will. We can decide what to do, and this is why I think the Bible uses a lot of parables in the Old Testament. When it tells you not to eat the apple and you still want to eat it, it's a manifestation of your free will. Sometimes it gets you into trouble.
Having lived in both China and now America, what is your opinion on how the public looks at the UFO topic? Is there a difference?
Yes, there's a large difference. The Chinese people are actually looking at more practical information that they obtained from reading books written by ET contactees. For example, this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, contains a lot of practical suggestions on how to improve the lives of individuals or the readers of the book. The Americans have been focusing too much on the testimonies of the people who claim to have retrieved the crashed UFO vehicles in Congress. I mean, if I think about it, if I'm a third party, I look at both countries, the people who focus on the ETs whose spacecraft did not and will never crash on Earth, whose civilization is far more advanced than the ones whose vehicles crash on Earth. And I think the Chinese people are having a very good advantage than the Americans, because the Americans are learning from the technologies of the ETs whose spacecraft crashed on Earth, meaning that their advancement is not that far more. It's not that good. So the Chinese people are learning from the masters, and the Americans are learning from our peers, who appear to have more advanced technologies, but in fact, they're pale in comparison to what the Chinese are learning. And also in the Chinese culture, people learn it through the informal means, learning from by at the grassroots level. Not they don't expect anything from the government. But in the US, I think there's a mentality that people are still waiting for the so-called official disclosure. The Chinese already know that they're ETs, and they started to have this kind of collective consciousness to learn from the ETs, and I think they're taking a lead in getting this information known by the people. They also know that great revolutions all come from at the grassroots level. They know that the Chairman Mao started the revolution in China in the rural part of China, and they didn't. If you learn about the history of China, not a lot of successful revolutions started from the cities. They all seem to start from the rural part of China. So are the rest of the world. So in America, people tend to want to lean on the government, wanting the government or the politicians to do certain things. And the Chinese people don't have that hope at all.
So it sounds like the Chinese people kind of they don't feel like they need the government to tell them that we are not alone. They are able to kind of process that themselves and collectively agree on it.
Exactly. Yes, and they're taking a lead.
And it sounds like, because you said the American government are learning from ETs that have crashed UFOs, and so if they're crashing, that they are obviously inferior. There are some stories that suggest that these things are gifts. What do you think about that? Have you heard people say that they are a gift rather than a crash?
I think they're just saving their face value by saying that they're gifts. They're not gifts, they're just crashed. We, the Americans, either had some kind of a system to make them crash, or they just crashed due to some unknown reasons. If they wanted to gift us the technologies, they would have done so more directly than just crashing the UFO crafts or the UAPs.
So, and if you're saying China are learning from or perhaps working with a more superior race that isn't crashing, what do you mean by that? Is that like, are you alluding to the idea that they are quite literally working with them face to face in some black programs, or is this more of a spiritual consciousness connection to a higher intelligence?
It's more like a spiritual consciousness connection. This book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, is extremely popular in China. It sold 1 million copies, and quite a few millions of people in China read the book and feel kind of inspired by certain knowledge passed on to the author by the highly advanced ETs. It's not a book just about the technologies. It's a book about spirituality, spiritual knowledge, about our ancient history, our ancient civilizations, the mysteries of the paranormal, the meanings of life, and also how we can become more spiritual and not to be really uh, kind of enslaved by the materialistic aspect of our lives. I know there are a lot of Chinese people who are still very materialistic, but more and more of them are becoming more spiritual and realizing that the meaning of life is about being compassionate to each other, being loving to each other, because we are all created by the same creator. It doesn't really matter if you're Americans or the Chinese or the Japanese or the Indians or the Europeans. We are all the creations of the creator.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's amazing to hear that the people in China are kind of having that sort of awakening themselves and are willing to kind of take it into their own hands and walk that path of spirituality without waiting for someone like the government to tell them to do so. Why do you think that is happening in China and not in the United States? Like, what do you think is the difference between the people in America and the West kind of waiting for the government to say, okay, this is true, versus the people in China who are willing to just go off and accept it themselves? Is there like a difference in propaganda or something in these countries?
No, in China, people tend to know that the official media um, is the official media, and the government has its own agenda to really promote the stability of the country. And there's certain information that the government doesn't really necessarily want to promote. They know that. So this is why they get information through the unofficial means, informal means. Versus in the US, there's still kind of this kind of reliance on the official or mainstream media. And if it's not for the New York Times article a few years ago that really publicized about the UAP phenomenon, a lot of people still wouldn't have believed that there's something out there that deserves special attention. And I think there's a kind of media control at play in the US that people don't necessarily realize. In China, people know that. In the US, people don't.
You met the author of the book in 2016. Did you learn anything from him about his experience that wasn't in the book, or was there anything that kind of gave you a deeper conviction of his story when you met him?
The reason that I tracked him down was to find out what else he knew but couldn't write in the book. Because in the postscript, it says there are far more incredible things that Michelle, knew but couldn't write in the book because we were far from understanding them. I was really curious about that, so I decided to search where he was living at that time and whether he was alive or not. It turned out that he was still alive. I was very happy, and he was living on an island in Vietnam, a Phuoc Island, an island called Phuoc Island. I could not find his exact address, but there was a tourist who posted a photo of his bungalow. It's a motel in Vietnam, and I copied that photo and printed out. And I flew to that island, and after landed, I showed that picture to a local taxi driver, asking him to take me there. And at the second try, he took me to the right location where I met Michel Demarquet. He was not very happy to see me, and he refused to answer all the questions I had about the book until 2 days before I was about to depart. He showed me a contract that he signed with a Chinese publisher who gave him $2,000 for copyright fees. But he never heard back from him, the publisher. He wanted me to follow up. I did, and the publisher didn't want to get the book published after all because for the fear of censorship, and and they decided not to get the book published. And Michelle asked me to find a different publisher. I did, and through a personal connection, that a different publisher decided to have it published as a science fiction. And then Michelle invited me to go to meet him for the second time, in which he would tell me what else he knew, but couldn't write in the book in person. Later, I found out why, because he didn't know how to type. He had to have his Vietnamese niece to type while he was dictating the content of the emails. So he kept it very private and very confidential. And he told that to me in person. And that's my motivation to really promote the messages in the book. Some of the things I could reveal, some of the things I cannot reveal. But I wrote an article revealing as many hints as possible and giving as many clues as possible about the one thing that he knew but couldn't write in the book. And the title of the article is The Second Coming of Jesus Christ, What We Need to Do to Prepare for It. And I allude what happened to Michelle to what happened to Enoch. If you know the book of Enoch, you know that he was taken by gods or the Jehovah's. And there's a book of Enoch describing what he saw. If you know what happened afterwards, 40 or 80 years after, his great-grandson Noah was told to build an ark. So Michelle was taken by the ETs, the Thiaoubans, in 1987. And you can imagine what's going to happen 40 or 80 years after. And I think this book, the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, is actually a modern version of the book of Enoch, describing what Michelle saw, heard, or witnessed after he was taken to the planet Thiaoouba, also pronounced as Thiaoouba in French.
So are you alluding to the idea that what these beings, the Thiaoubans, told him was something akin to creating some kind of ark in preparation for a geophysical event?
Not necessarily or exactly a flood or ark to be created. I would say that the future depends on our collective actions. So the past is fixed. Actually, Michelle saw the past. He saw what happened in ancient civilizations. He saw his past lives. But the future is changeable depending on our actions. So it's just like students taking exam. The questions on the exam are already made by the teachers or examiners. But it's really up to us how to respond to the questions on the exam. We can respond by perfectly and having a perfect score, but we can also fail the exam. So it's really on how we prepare for it. So this is why I've been so effortlessly promoting the messages in the book, a book of spirituality, so that we can raise our collective consciousness to be more spiritual.
I think that's can only be a good thing. And I guess what I'm getting from you there is that there is perhaps some kind of exam coming up. It could be a way to put it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we are actually in the process of taking exam right now. And there's a time when the exam is to be collected by the proctor or the examiner. So that's when everything will be determined.
Interesting. And do you have any idea as to what that could look like or when it might be?
Yes, I know. And it's actually described in the article that I wrote. It's actually very similar to what the New Testament of the Bible describes it, especially the four Gospels. And if you read into that, if you read between the lines, you're going to understand what is likely going to be happening in the future.
Okay, I'll make sure I leave a link to your article and everything else that you need below so people can fully read it. But are you able to give a little overview of the article and just some detail on that?
Well, I would recommend or encourage people to read the book first, because without reading the book, you're going to fail to grasp the messages in the book, especially the specific details of how the ETs have been mentoring us in the past, the historical events that happened, their interventions in the past. For example, they intervened during World War II, preventing Germany from being the first country to develop the atomic bomb. And I did some research. Indeed,
That's fascinating.
yes. So they sided with the Americans during World War II, believing that the Americans were more sincere in protecting individual liberty. And the book explains why they did it. They did it because by ending the war much earlier than otherwise, they would save hundreds of millions of people's lives. Because if the war continued, then more people would have been killed. And I did some research. Dr. Heisenberg of Germany was far more advanced than the American counterpart scientists in researching the atomic bomb. But for some very strange reason, he made a stupid mistake, miscalculation. And his report was read by Hitler, believing that Germany didn't have enough natural resources or raw materials to make the bomb. So that's why Hitler gave out a plan. The Americans got the lead. So I think the ETs intervene from time to time, but they don't for some trivial things because they don't serve the plate. They don't serve the meal on a plate. And they believe that God helps those who help themselves. And they also give like a parable analogy. If you try to teach your son to solve a mathematical question or problem, you wouldn't just give the answer directly to him. You would give him the basic concepts or directions or way to solve it, and he would be able to solve it on his own and to learn about it. And this is the way they have been guiding us, just to, from time to time, giving us concepts or directions directly or indirectly, so that we can learn from it. And they don't really kind of be involved necessarily from time to time directly.
That aligns with what we hear a lot, in that, you know, these beings or this intelligence will not directly interfere or intervene, and, you know, it doesn't want to touch free will. It really aligns with a lot of the things that you and others have said, that it's up to us to kind of work it out for ourselves. And you're right, you know, when you do want to teach someone something, you don't just give them the answer, because that's not really teaching them. It's just kind of giving them the result, but that's not actually useful in the long term. And I know that it kind of touches on the idea that the physical existence, our physical existence here on Earth, is only to develop spiritually, and that perhaps we sort of exist beyond this physical construct. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, in essence, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So when we pass, when we die, our astral body will leave our physical body. What happens is that after that happens, we're going to feel very blissful, very comfortable. And there's a process in which we're going to reveal how we did in this lifetime. So we are able to see, experience, and feel how others felt when we did certain things onto the others. It's like a holographic film, but we are able to feel everything. A lot of people who experience the near-death experiences can testify this is what happens. And what happens is that you're going to be able to evaluate yourself. A lot of Christians believe in the judgment day. And because the Creator created every one of us, in a sense, we are part of the Creator, part of God, and God is part of us. And by means that we are evaluating ourselves is equivalent to saying that God is evaluating how we did in our lifetime. But in essence, we are evaluating how we did in our past lives. And we are going to realize what we did correctly. We're going to feel the appreciation and the happiness of the people we helped. But we are also going to feel the pains and sufferings of the people we wronged. And then in 3 days' time, 81% of electrons of our astral body will go to our higher self. And this is why Christ resurrected 3 days after being crucified on the cross. And this is why in Tibetan culture, the Tibetans believe that the corpse of the dead are not to be touched for at least 3 days because the cycle has not been completed yet. And the other 19% of the electrons will remain in nature until that person, the electrons are recycled by nature, or when that person reincarnates. And this is why some people say that they can see ghosts. What they see are actually the 19% of the electrons that remain in nature after the passing of the person who just died. And because they're static forces, the electrons resemble the appearance of the person who just passed. And also because electrons can store memories or knowledge or some of the things that the person experienced. This is why ghosts frequently haunt the places they loved or hated. And if you don't like ghosts, you can just use fire or lighter just to make the ghost disappear. So there's nothing to fear about. A lot of Chinese people are afraid of ghosts, but after reading this book, they have no fear at all because they have the knowledge. They have the knowledge about ghosts.
You said you can use a fire or a lighter. What effect does that have?
So fire or lighter can kind of dispel electrons or ghosts. So people use sage or they use kind of fire to keep ghosts away, and in fact that works well. And also I just actually saw a video, and it's actually corroborated in the Chinese communities as well. So nowadays the vehicles, the cars, they have LiDAR or radar detectors. So when they go into forests or near tombs, they sometimes detect people around by the LiDARs or radars. But when they see outside, they don't see any people around. And what they're detecting are actually the electrons or the ghosts of the people who passed. And Chinese people see that, and Americans and people can also see that.
Interesting. Do you think, I know you've said that you feel like the Chinese people are sort of a step ahead in terms of accepting the spiritual side of reality, but do you think there is a shift beginning to take place in America? And do you perhaps think that is what is going on with things like Skywatcher, who are talking more about, divine feminine and consciousness? What's your opinion on that side of things?
I'm definitely hoping that the Americans are going to become more aware of the spiritual aspect of the UAP phenomenon. It's not just a phenomenon in the sky; it's actually more profound. It has very, very important theological and religious implications. And I think people should pay more attention and learn more from the masters who have been guiding us throughout history, throughout the past, and not just focusing on the crashed vehicle retrievals. And there are a lot of special interest groups at play. For example, if I'm the military industrial complex, a defense contractor, I would definitely pose the ETs or UAPs as a threat to us because I can get more military funding. I can get more money from the government. And I can definitely pose the ETs as a potential invader to us, saying that they're dangerous and they have more advanced weapons and systems to potentially invade us in the future. I can definitely pose that and to cause fear to the public. But I would challenge those people that if the ETs really wanted to do that, why didn't they do that much earlier or a long time ago when it would be much easier to do so when we were less developed technologically? And And I think this is also another reason why we haven't gone back to the moon, astronauts, in the last 50 years or so, giving one excuse after another, even after with more advanced technologies and lowered costs in developing such um, systems to land on the moon. And I think this is because we're worn out from the moon. And if the ETs don't allow us to land on the moon again, then they would also prevent other ETs who are not spiritually ready to come in contact with us, not to say to invade us. So I think when we are spiritually ready, then we are able to explore the universe again. And actually, if you read the book, you're going to realize that we had ancient civilizations that were highly spiritual. And during those times, the ETs from Thiaoouba were in constant contact with those ancient civilizations. For example, the civilization on Lemuria in the Pacific Ocean, where you can still see the moas on Easter Island. And so that's
You
one
mean
thing.
like the big head statues?
Yes.
You believe they're a representation of the people who lived in Lemuria?
Well, they actually made the statues on Easter Island just to commemorate the ETs who were in contact with them, specifically the Thiaoubans.
So you believe the statues are representations of the Thiaoubans?
Yes, stylized representations.
Interesting. And what do you think the connection is between these ancient civilizations like Lemuria, Atlantis, and you've just sort of mentioned we were warned off the moon? Do you think that is from a similar race, or is there a connection between ancient civilizations and the moon?
Yes, the book actually says that since we all came from different planets, the ancestors of the Polynesians came from a planet called Arimo X3. They had a very successful civilization on Lemuria. Once they landed here, they actually built a great pyramid in the northwestern corner of the continent. They used the pyramid to make rain and also used it as an energy center so that they can communicate with people on different planets. However, before they landed here, they actually encountered resistance by the Chinese people. There was a small group of Chinese people living on the continent of Lemuria back about 250,000 years ago. And the Chinese people were very suspicious. They are still very suspicious by nature. And I'm Chinese, so I know that. So they actually wanted to have a fight, a war with the people from Arimo X3. And the people from Arimo X3 were highly spiritual, and so they didn't want to cause a war. So this is why they retreated back to the far side of the moon and built ET bases as transfer stations to migrate their people little by little, step by step, to the continent of Lemuria. And this is why you hear people say that there may be artificial structures on the backside of the moon. Yes, there are. And this book specifically tells us why that's the case and how they were built and by whom. And they also took Michelle to the civilization on Lemuria, seeing that they didn't have money in their society. So everyone just grabbed what they needed in the marketplace. And no one took advantage of each other because they were highly civilized people. Everyone abide by the rules. And the book also mentions that there were people who lived on Mars about 1.35 million years ago. Because when the blacks and the yellows first explored the solar system, they noticed that people were living on Mars. The people who lived on the Mars were highly spiritual, but not very technologically advanced. And Mars actually was a dying planet, meaning that the core of Mars was cooling down. So when the core of a planet cools down, it no longer has the electronic magnetic force to capture the atmosphere. So the planet becomes a desert, like what Mars now is. So this is why they chose Earth to be the planet to migrate in. So a lot of the conspiracy theorists say that there is a conspiracy of the elite to control the population on Earth. They make the example of the Guidestones in Georgia, the Georgia Guidestones. Yeah. And I want to say to the people who build the Guidestone that we can actually migrate to a different planet. You don't have to really control the population if there's an overpopulation issue. We can develop our technologies to the extent that we can find a different planet to migrate in. So there's no use to, and it's actually bad for them as well, to control the population by artificial means.
So when you say that, it reminds me of earlier, you said that an extraterrestrial race interfered or intervened in World War II to help the Americans because they were concerned about the destruction of the population. But there are stories of there are stories, or maybe conspiracy theories, that there have always been 3 world wars planned, 1, 2, and the final third one, to kind of install a new world order and sort of like a one government rule. But part of that new world order is to have the population reduced down, which sort of sounds like the opposite of why an extraterrestrial species intervened in the Second World War. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there is some kind of nefarious new world order attempting to install itself, or is this against what an extraterrestrial species would allow to happen?
Well, the ETs, if you read about the book, you're going to realize that they intervene sometimes indirectly. People will ask, like, why they just didn't kill Hitler, preventing World War II from happening in the very beginning. And I would counter that they respect our free will. They also respect the free will of Hitler. So Hitler has to go through his own course to realize the pains and sufferings he caused to the Jewish people. So, in a sense, the ETs will intervene from time to time, but most of the times indirectly. Regarding the new world order, there is a suggestion, and if people really want to read into the opposite pole of this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, I would recommend them to read another book, which is titled 334 Lies, L-I-E-S. It's an autobiography of the former chairman of a secret society that was originally founded in Germany. And that book talks about how the secret society manipulated the politicians or business leaders of the world behind the scenes through different means, not just mind control, but also social engineering. They developed very strong psychic abilities to see the past, to see the auras of people, and to see the probabilities of the future. And this is probably why, if you look into the Illuminati card game, it actually predicts a lot of the events that happened after the release of the game. But that book is not for the average reader. It's not for the public to really read it as a novel or something like that. It contains a lot of disturbing descriptions of the rituals that they perform during the initiation ceremonies. It's a very disturbing book.
So these are rituals, like occult sort of practices.
This is actually why I really suggest the audience to read the book Thiaoouba Prophecy to get a basic understanding about how human beings work on Earth and elsewhere, how human beings are created, and the different categories of planets in the universe. Because in the book, 334 Lies, it explains how they developed the psychic abilities through different means. It gets very technical and is very specific, actually.
Okay, interesting. Because I am interested in the ritual occult side of things, because I do very much think that does happen, especially in the higher levels of society and the secret societies as well. What era was that book sort of referring to? Like, what era is written about in that book? Are we talking sort of World War II era, or is it more recent than that?
It's actually fairly recent. The book 334 Lies was published in German language back in 2000, the year 2000, and the author
Okay.
disappeared in the summer of 2001, just a few months before 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And I translated the book from German to English just a few years ago.
Wow. That's fascinating. That sounds like it would be an interesting read. Another book that's interesting is The Three Body Problem, because this is something that apparently is passed around in high levels of the US government and military, and kind of cited as something that is somewhat closest to the truth of what may be going on. What do you think about that?
It's a pure science fiction. It's a novel, and actually, I don't read any science fictions. I don't read any for a reason because I think it's better to put my time into reading non-fictions. I can actually elaborate a little bit more about how they develop their psychic abilities um, versus a better way to do so, because you seem to be interested in the topic.
Hmm.
As I mentioned before, the Hebrews originally came from Category 3 planet. So if you read the Old Testament of the Bible, you're going to realize that the Hebrews lived 800 or 900 years old in the very beginning. But as days come by, they lost the ability to have that long longevity. It's because even though they had this kind of spiritual um, elevation, um, but since they lived on Earth, they have to adapt to the earthly environment, which is kind of like a lower Category 1 planet. But there are ways to really develop psychic abilities. A natural way is to meditate, to really get your chakras connected to each other. Because there are people who can see auras and chakras, and they tell that the people who have psychic abilities tend to have chakras that are connected. Um, and they have better, more spiritual auras as well. And you can do that through meditation and also prayers. If you read the text of the Catholic priests, you're going to know that some Catholic priests were able to levitate during deep prayers. They didn't know why, but they did it. So, but the people in these secret societies, they did it through other means. So they, in short, they absorbed the electrons of the people they killed. So they kill people and then absorb the electrons of the people they.
This is like sacrifice, right? This is
Yes,
sacrifice.
yes.
Yeah, this is. We can talk about this if you're comfortable, because this is something I've explored on the channel quite a bit. Is what you're? Would you say what you're referring to here is akin to like satanic ritual abuse? These are people worshiping like false idols, or just Lucifer?
Um, that's a different secret society, and people do that in that secret society. But this secret society is not named in the book. The book doesn't name any names. What they did was that there's a description in the initiation ceremony in which the author, who used a pseudonym, um, was led into the basement of a location that he was told to visit. And then the people in the secret society called pizzas, like to have a pizza delivered. So they gave the pizza delivery boy a wrong address. And then the pizza delivery boy delivered the pizza to that wrong location. And the lady from the secret society waited the boy at that location and took the boy here to the right location where everyone was waiting for him. And then he was drugged. So he drank something and he was drugged. He lost his consciousness. And then he was tied up in the basement. And then the other members of the secret society encouraged or asked the author to torture him to death. And then through the torturing process, there are a lot of descriptions like that. And at the end, he was told to take his heart out using a knife and then to eat his heart. And then if you know about this, you're going to realize that the heart has a lot of kind of electrons. This is why it beats.
Yeah.
So when the astral body goes into the embryo, meaning the electrons of the astral body go into the embryo, the heart of the baby or the embryo starts to beat. So the heart
it's like the charge.
Yes. So the heart has a lot of electrons. So when he ate the heart of the pizza delivery boy, he actually absorbed part of the astral body of the pizza delivery boy. So that's why this is part of the reason that he developed his psychic abilities. And also he was chosen to join the secret society because members of the lodge can see auras, can see the past lives of the person. And he actually was an ancient pharaoh in Egypt in his past lives, one of his past lives. So he has this kind of potential to develop such psychic abilities more easily than other people. So he was actually lured into this secret society. He was chosen to join, and this it's by invitation only.
So just to confirm that I'm understanding you correctly, these people, I identified this pizza delivery boy as having some kind of extrasensory perception or some kind of psychic ability, and by consuming him, they were able to like inherit those abilities themselves.
Not the pizza delivery boy, but the author was chosen to join the lodge, join the secret society, because the author of the book had the potential to develop such psychic abilities. In addition to that, he also ate the
So
heart.
the author did.
Yes.
Right. So So the author was identified as having the potential for these abilities, and by consuming the heart of another person, how does that enhance those abilities or bring them out? Because I'm assuming that's the point of the ritual.
Well, it described in the book 334% lies is that he felt another astral body joining his own astral body. So this is why he sometimes has schizophrenia, like having split personalities. But that's actually one of the ways I think that helped him to achieve more psychic powers.
Right. And this story with the pizza boy and this ritual, this is taking place in Germany or somewhere else?
In Germany.
In Germany. Wow. That is crazy stuff. And it's a dark rabbit hole when you start getting into all of those kind of things.
Yes. That actually also explains why the Jewish people excel at everything they do. Is that they actually originally coming from Category 3 planet. They actually brought a lot of electrons uh, in their astral bodies with them. So this is why they tend to be more intelligent and more spiritual than other kinds of people. But when they intermarry, then that's a different issue.
So you think there is something to the fact that Jewish people are sort of inherently, I guess we could say, superior to the rest, to the other races, including your own and my own on the planet?
Well, I would say more spiritual in the very beginning. They came to Earth about 12,000 years ago. And if you really want to study further into that, you can see that the DNA makeups of the Jewish people are different from the rest of us.
And I do know DNA testing is illegal in Israel. Do you think that has something to do with it?
I don't know, but I think the result is that the good Jewish people are really good and very spiritual.
Right, but they're perhaps not all good.
Mm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That is interesting because I have looked into some things written in the Talmud that basically explicitly define people who are not Jewish as like subhuman or at least lesser than. And some people say that these things are just a conspiracy theory, but it's interesting to hear it from your perspective in that there's actually a almost like a spiritual science to it, and that although the things that are written in that book
I mean,
feel a little bit dehumanizing, it's interesting to hear from your perspective that there actually might be something to that.
just to tell the truth, the first time I read the book, halfway through the book, I thought it was a science fiction. Um, Especially there are a lot of controversial issues discussed in the book that I find that some people might not readily accept. So finding a publisher is really difficult, even in China and in Taiwan. And I think when people read the book, they're going to see, oh, this is science fiction. But I would encourage them to read the book to the end and then to do additional research and to see if everything adds up.
Why do you think that all these different races came here? Because you said basically each race is from its own planet. What is there a point on why we've all kind of been put here to kind of commingle and I guess go through this learning process together?
So mostly people migrate to a different planet is because that their original planet is cooling down. For example, the blacks and the yellows first came to Earth because their original planet was cooling down, like becoming like Mars. And the ancestors of the Polynesians, due to their overpopulation issue, and the Hebrews came here by accident. Um, the Caucasians, there's no explanation in the book. I don't know. I didn't ask the author. I thought he was going to be alive for a few more years, but he passed away just a few months after I met him for the second time, unfortunately. But he did reveal something else. He said that there are three chambers beneath the Sphinx. That when we are ready spiritually, the three chambers can be opened. And once they're opened, everything will be known. He also talked about the grace as well. So there are a lot of things in the book that deserve special attention.
Interesting. And do you think that has any connection to things that Chris Bledsoe has said about a new knowledge and, the Star of Regulus aligning with the Sphinx in 2026?
I actually haven't read the Chris book yet. When I read a book, I have to be able to find anything that I can verify, specific verifiable facts. And I find a lot of books by ET contactees have or contain vague information, spiritual information that is really good, but vague information that there's no way for us to verify. But this book is different. Thiaoouba prophecy has specific facts that people can verify. For example, it talks about the tomb of Jesus in Japan. And the book was published in 1993, years before internet went to Australia or went to his home, the author's home. And he never traveled to Japan, but the description of the tomb of Jesus in Japan matches what we can find about the description of the tomb of Jesus online. So that's one thing that really struck me. And it really explains why Jesus never performed miracles before the age of 30, before he began preaching, why Christ resurrected 3 days after, just to show us that there's life after death and there's reincarnation. And they also listed the 4 Catholic Church Council meetings that intentionally distorted the original meanings of the ancient scriptures. So the book is very specific on that.
And you spoke earlier about, God being within us. This kind of sounds a lot like the Gnostic texts. Do you think there's some kind of correlation there, or have you looked into that at all?
Yes, indeed. I think the early Christians, the Gnostics, believed in reincarnation, and we do go through the different cycles of life and past lives. So this is actually proven by modern scientists or medical doctors of the U.S. or Canada, like Dr. Michael Newton, Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Ian Stevenson, Dr. Raymond Moody. The concept of reincarnation is widely accepted by the people in China or in Asia, but not by the Christians, because the Bible doesn't really explicitly talk about it. So this is the reason. But the early Christians believed in reincarnation. Some of them did.
Why do you think it's not as accepted in the West? Do you think it is a form of like fear-based control?
I think it's probably due to religions or religious beliefs. It's mostly due to the Christian religion, actually. So this is why religion is actually the number 4 danger on earth. The book actually criticizes, sorry, the Catholics here, the Catholic religion specifically. You
What
can
does it
read into
say?
the book. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about what it says about the Catholicism?
It says that the Catholic Church is actually one of the wealthiest organizations on earth. And they can actually put the money into better use, helping the poor, than spending a lot of money on themselves, on the logistics, on the administrative expenses. And they collect money from the people and who want to pay off their sins, but they do a lot of wrongs themselves. Sorry, Catholics.
Yeah. No, I don't. I don't think you have to apologize. I mean, you didn't write the book, and you're just kind of relaying what's in it. And I would agree with you in a way. But I don't necessarily think it's just Catholicism. I kind of think all religions seem to have been corrupted in some form, and that, or at least sort of removing the power from people in what you're saying, in that God or finding that connection is within everybody. But the Catholic churches and most religions don't necessarily teach that. They kind of take the power away from you.
Yes, we can really communicate to the Creator directly without going through the church or the pastors or the priests or
I agree.
any religions or anything. Like we can just pray or meditate and just look inside for answers. Follow the
Yeah,
teachings of Christ.
I 100% agree with that, Samuel. And it's interesting how you mentioned that, money specifically is, and I mean, money is the root of all evil. We all know that saying. And so it's interesting to hear you relate that to the church, and it makes me think of another prophecy, which you may be familiar with, which is the Hopi prophecy. And they talk about an age of purification that is potentially impending, and that once this time comes, there will sort of be a new age that begins, and it will sort of have a new set of rules. And one of those things specifically is that there will be no financial system, and that what I have, you can take, and what you have, I can take too. And it's just this sort of free trade system, which sounds exactly what you said earlier is done on the planet Thuba, or from these other civilizations. There's no monetary system. It's just everything is shared.
Exactly. And actually, that kind of civilization existed on Earth before. Between 250,000 years ago until 14,500 years ago, when the continent of Lemuria sunk into the ocean almost overnight. So that's actually very kind of an event, very unfortunate event that happened. When the king of Lemuria died, people did not have sorrowful funerals. They actually celebrated it because they knew that he was going to go on the next journey, a spiritual journey that's going to have a more exciting life waiting for him. So they knew that he did good for the people, for the interests of the people, that he is going to be rewarded spiritually when he reincarnates. So they celebrated for his death.
That's awesome. And that's actually something that I've spoken about on this channel before, that I wish we were able to view death in a more positive light, as like a celebration of life rather than a time of grief and mourning. I mean, obviously, we all miss our friends and our family when they pass, but I believe that we also have like a choice over how we feel about things, and that it could be given a more positive light, and it could be a celebration of life rather than the mourning of it. Because, if we do exist beyond this physical realm, are we really even dying?
We don't die. And actually, I would suggest people to read the research studies of Ian Stevenson. He did extensive research of people who remember their past lives. And I think that perhaps will give people better meanings for life.
The continent of Lemuria was said to exist in the Pacific Ocean. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it sunk, right?
Yes.
Do you think that, because when you look at the Pacific Ocean on a globe, it's, if you put the globe in the right spot, the Pacific Ocean and around it, it's half of the globe almost. Like you can almost see no land if you look at the globe on the right angle. And if a land has sunk there, it makes me think about, some people talk about like a pole flip happening, like a magnetic pole flip. Do you think something like that was the cause of the sinking of Lemuria, and that potentially it might be flipping back around in the future?
It could be, but there's no direct answer from the book. However, what's said in the book is that there are gaseous belts beneath the continent of Lemuria. And when an earthquake struck, the gas or natural gas from the beneath the surface kind of sprout out and then cause a lot of volcanic activities and earthquakes. And if you read about the geological findings, you're going to find some kind of verifications or proofs that there are gaseous belts or gaseous reserves in the Pacific Ocean. And and when that happened, the disasters kind of irreversibly occurred, causing the loss of technologies and a great civilization.
You've said that this intelligence will not intervene with free will, but it will sort of guide and steer us and kind of help us solve the problems ourselves. And given that this advanced civilization potentially has sunken into the Pacific Ocean, I find it interesting that we also seem to be like the New Jersey drone flap, for example. A lot of these things seem to be coming from the ocean, or we at least hear stories from people like Danny Sheehan, another lawyer, who speaks about there being underwater bases. And you've got these stories of attempted salvages in the Pacific Ocean after bluegill triple prime knocking something out of the sky. There seems to be a lot of mystery around the ocean in terms of the origin of this intelligence. Do you think there could be a connection to the intelligence and Lemuria or Atlantis or something like that?
Not necessarily. I think the people of Lemuria are actually the current people, or actually their descendants are the current people who live on the Polynesian islands. And Lemuria was a continent that sunk into the ocean that actually brought the secrets of their technologies with them. Unfortunately, we didn't really have anyone just to learn about more about their technologies nowadays. However, I do think that some of the secret society members have found some of the secrets from ancient civilizations, such as Lemuria. This is one of the reasons they're able to develop such strong psychic abilities to see the past and probabilities of the future. In terms of the New Jersey drones and also the activities in the ocean, I think they may be the activities of the ETs, but also maybe our own military activities that are not revealed to the public yet.
Hmm. Do you think there's something going on in Antarctica as well?
Antarctica, yes, I believe so. But I don't really go into that direction because I think there are far more important spiritual lessons for us to research and learn than what is going on in Antarctica. But I do think that there are probably ET bases over there, but they're probably taking an approach of non-interference.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. What do you think is the importance of, I guess, love, positive frequencies, and the effect that this can have on our sort of collective consciousness on a wider scale?
So once people realize that we are all created by the same creator and that the creator wants to experience spiritual experiences through our physical bodies, then we are more likely going to realize that we should treat one another just like what we want to be treated. Just follow the teachings of Christ and to really live a more compassionate life, to really wake up and to rise up against the tyrannies in the world through nonviolent resistance. Violence never does anything. Hitler tried, Napoleon tried, it never succeeded. It will never succeed in the future. The real solution lies in the cultivation of the mind through love and compassion, through the teachings of Christ. So I think this is the essence of the book. And as AI and technology develops, and I think people need to realize that the spiritual development needs to keep up with our technological development. Otherwise, we're going to destroy ourselves with our technologies.
Yeah, and this is exactly what the Hopi prophecy outlines as well, is that the spiritual and the technological needs to stay in balance and in alignment. I totally agree with the love message that you just gave, but I want to also get your opinion on why is it you think that it feels like such a struggle for people to kind of realize and develop that? Like, to me, it feels like there is something intentionally trying to prevent us in this world. Like, it does feel like there is a negative either intelligence or something happening that thrives on keeping people divided. What do you think that is, and what is going on there?
The free will of some of the people that are controlling everything behind the scenes indirectly. So politicians come and go, but there's a group of people in deep state that kind of remain in power all the time. But there's also a different layer. And this is why I want to suggest people to read a book, 334 Lies. That actually explains how the secret societies function and work behind the scenes. And also read a book by Dr. John Coleman titled the Committee of 300. He was a former MI6 intelligence officer who accidentally found some of the secrets of the Committee of 300. And you're going to be enlightened by his book as well. And he was able to predict political events before they happen. So this is very interesting.
You've mentioned that suicides breach a sort of spiritual contract. So do you believe sort of each person is incarnating with a predetermined mission or things that they have to learn? And do people, like, can you fail that and then you have to reincarnate and try again?
Yes. Major events in one's life are predetermined. And those are the challenges in your life. You have to learn how to respond correctly or spiritually. And then if you decide to suicide, then it's going to be like breach of contract. You have to retake the lesson and continue to learn the spiritual lesson that you didn't learn.
Right. So basically, in life, the same lessons will keep showing up until you figure it out and learn it, and you then only until then will you sort of move forward onto the next one.
Yes, that's right.
Is there anything else you want to mention, Samuel?
I would just want to emphasize that if you really want to learn something, learn from the best, learn from the masters, learn from the ETs whose spacecraft did not and will never crash on Earth. Don't focus on the ones that crashed.
And you believe you can make that connection and begin that learning through meditation and other practices?
As well as obtaining knowledge from the ETs from the book Thiaoouba Prophecy.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time, mate. Is there any websites or links that you want me to include here for people to see your work or reach you at?
Yeah, they can find me on websites, different websites, on YouTube. The book Thiaoouba Prophecy can be found on Amazon and also on Audible. The other book, 334 Lies, is not for everyone. Just when you have a strong stomach, when you know something about these secret societies and their initiation ceremonies and rituals, you can take a look at it, but just be careful. It contains very disturbing content.
I appreciate the disclaimer on that one. Well, thank you very much. I'll make sure I include all those links below for everyone who wants to go and check out the books and your work as well. But thank you very much for your time today, Samuel. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Josh.
Eventually, people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it